the news tonight, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians they allege carried out knife attacks on Israelis in the occupied West Bank as 8-week-old wave of violence show no sign of dying down. The British Prime Minister is set to make the case for war against Daesh terrorists in Syria, which could see airstrikes begin before Christmas. And the Belgian capital extends its top threat alert till tomorrow as security forces continue their search for militants, though to be at large in Brussels. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. In the latest violence in the Palestinian lands, Israeli soldiers killed 3 Palestinians they alleged attacked Israelis with knives. In one incident, Israeli soldiers claim a Palestinian woman tried to stab an Israeli at Hawara Junction south of Nablus, but was run over by a Jewish settler and then shot dead by soldiers. Later, a Palestinian man was shot dead after attempting to drive into civilians with a taxi before charging at them with a knife, according to the Israeli story. And a third attack took place near an Israeli settlement in which a Palestinian stabbed an Israeli woman and was shot dead by security forces. Today's killings are the latest in a wave of violence since October 1st that has left 88 Palestinians dead. Iraq said its armed forces were advancing towards the city of Ramadi from the north as part of an attempt to encircle the city in preparation for an offensive against Daesh terrorists controlling it. A statement released by the Iraqi Ministry of Defense said forces are continuing their advance towards the center of the city from the northern side, supported by Iraqi air forces and heavy artillery shelling. The ministry also released footage showing airstrikes by coalition forces that destroyed a Daesh tactical unit and a building believed to be controlled by the group near Ramadi and Tal Afar. Recent gains have raised expectations that the military is set to strike 6 months after vowing to seize the city. Meanwhile, and in the fight against Daesh terrorists, the United States and its allies conducted 25 strikes against the group in Syria and Iraq since yesterday. A statement by the Combined Joint Task Force said 16 strikes were carried out in Iraq, 5 of which hit around Ramadi, destroying weapons, tactical units and fighting positions. The coalition also struck targets in 9 other cities, including Sinjar, Mosul and Tikrit. In Syria, 5 strikes out of 9 hit near Al-Hasakeh, destroying vehicles and wounding a number of terrorists. 3 other strikes struck near Al-Hol and Al-Ma'ara. The coalition said it used bomber attack, ground attack, fighter and remotely piloted aircraft against Daesh targets. British Prime Minister David Cameron will outline this week the case for joining airstrikes against Daesh terrorists in Syria. Britain is already bombing Daesh in Iraq, but Cameron said he believed Britain should be doing more to fight the terrorists. In an interview with BBC, British Finance Minister George Osborne said Cameron will seek support across Parliament for strikes against the terrorist organization in Syria. Osborne said the Paris attacks were likely changing the views of those previously opposed to British airstrikes, but said the government would only call a vote when it was confident it could win. Britain's newspaper Today, carrying headlines including "Britain prepares for war," reported a vote could be held within the next 2 weeks, with bombing underway by Christmas.
Coming week and the week ahead, the Prime Minister will come to the House of Commons and he will respond to the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee. That's the group of MPs who have looked into the broader strategy on ISIL. He'll make the case, we'll make the case as a government. We'll allow MPs to digest that response and then we'll see where we stand.
Russia's anti-terrorism forces have killed 10 militants who had sworn allegiance to Daesh in an early morning raid. Russia's state news agency, Interfax, said that during the active phase of a special operation near the city of Nalchik in Russia's North Caucasus region, 10 militants were neutralized. The report added that the men were all members of armed groups and that had sworn allegiance to Daesh terrorists. In Brussels, Belgium woke up to a second day of maximum security as the streets were empty, with police and military vehicles guarding key buildings. Belgium yesterday put the capital on the maximum level 4 alert, shutting the metro and warning people to avoid crowds because of the threat of coordinated multiple attacks. After a meeting of security chiefs called to review the threat status, Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel said the capital's metro, universities and schools would be closed tomorrow too. For the rest of the country, a threat level of 3 would remain in place. Belgium is at the heart of investigations into the Paris attacks after links to Brussels and the district of Molenbeek in particular emerged. The country widened its search for 2 fugitive suspected militants who slipped back to Brussels from Paris shortly after the attacks. They still remain at large. UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon urged Russia and the United States to cooperate in rooting out terrorism and said he would unveil a comprehensive plan to fight extremism and violence early next year. At a meeting on the sidelines of a ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur with Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, Ban said he counted on Russia's support to wipe out a common enemy, adding that the United Nations was gathering ideas for members towards a joint counter-terror strategy. Medvedev said that terrorism does not have boundaries and stressed the need to build cooperative work in order to fight the militant group.
It's a terrorist and extremists should be defeated in the name of humanity. In that regard, we need to be united. We need to show global solidarity to address this common enemy of ISIL, Daesh, or some other extremist and terrorist groups. I again highly commend the leadership of Russian Federation together with the United States to address the root causes, some of the root causes of this terrorism.
Terrorism does not have borders. We need to build cooperative work in order to fight Daesh as a terrorist factor. It is necessary to do it in tight cooperation, trying to agree on efforts, both political and military, which states have suffered from terrorism are taking.
Separately, U.S. President Barack Obama and Medvedev called on all countries to coordinate and thwart Daesh after its recent devastating attack on a Russian plane and on multiple targets in Paris. Obama said it would be helpful if Russia directed its focus on tackling Daesh, hoping Moscow would agree to a leadership transition in Syria.
Turkey, I discussed with President Putin in a brief pull-aside his need to recognize that he needs to go after the people who killed Russian citizens. And those aren't the groups that they were currently hitting with strikes. So they're going to have to make an adjustment in terms of what they're prioritizing.
Malaysia handed over the rotating chairmanship of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to Laos, making the end of a 2-day regional meeting in Kuala Lumpur. Leaders from 18 countries who gathered for the summit in Malaysia issued strong calls for action after a recent spate of attack by Daesh in Paris, Mali and Lebanon. Regional issues, mainly territorial dispute among ASEAN and China over the South China Sea, were also discussed in the meeting. During a news conference at the end of the 2-day meeting, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak called Daesh a travesty of Islam.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about a military solution, but we have to win the hearts and minds of the people And by doing that, they have to be convinced that IS is a perverted, a travesty of Islam, which runs counter to the true teachings of Islam. So that counter narrative, Malaysia can provide.
Egyptians voted today in the second phase of elections that are meant to restore parliament after more than a 3-year gap. In the first round held in October, Egyptians turned out in low numbers, with loyalists to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi winning a landslide. Today, turnout was not high either, with many of those who abstained from casting their votes saying they felt the polls offered little genuine choice. Here's more.
For the 8th time since Egypt's 2011 uprising, Egyptians are lining up to cast their votes. This time they're walking into the polls for the second phase of parliamentary elections. Here in Suez, one voter says he's hopeful.
This is my first time to participate in an election. Secondly, I want to see whether or not Suez will improve after the election. And hopefully things will become better. And God willing, the 4 candidates running this year will do something for Suez because we have unemployment, health issues, and other problems.
The vote is meant to restore parliament after a more than 3-year hiatus. But critics say the vote has been undermined by widespread repression. In Cairo, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi cast his vote soon after voting opened. His supporters won a landslide in the first phase in October and are expected to win again in this vote. Sisi has hailed the elections as a milestone on the army's roadmap to democracy, though voter turnout has been low. Many who abstained say they felt the polls offered little genuine choice.
Though the big snowfall in China has brought a lot of fun to citizens in Beijing, the country's weather observatory issued an alert for a snowstorm in the capital and neighboring regions. The National Meteorological Center said snowstorms will hit Inner Mongolia region and nearby provinces, as well as Beijing and Tianjin municipalities, with some areas expected to see snowfall to up to 12 millimeters. The center suggested snow-hit areas take precautions as temperatures were forecast to plunge to minus 12 degrees Celsius. World number 1 Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer are meeting now for the 44th time in the ATP Finals in London. Federer set up a showdown with Djokovic when he beats fellow Swiss Stanislas Wawrinka 7-5, 6-3 in their semi-finals. Though the 34-year-old 6-time title holder fell behind the opening set, he rattled off 4 consecutive games to move ahead and then cruised through the second set with smooth efficiency. Djokovic reached the final of the ATP World Tour Finals yesterday after beating Rafael Nadal. Australian Wadi Kamir Shell rode his way to a win at the Hawaiian Pro, the first event of the Vans Triple Crown of surfing. Kamir Shell won the 4-man final heat with a combined score of 15.40, narrowly defeating world number 2 Filippo Toledo of Brazil, who finished with a combined score of 14.83. The Hawaiian Pro event was the first stop of the Vans Triple Crown of surfing, which takes place at 3 beaches on Hawaii's famous North Shore. The second stop in the Vans World Cup of Surfing at Sunset Beach, with a window of November 24th to December 6th. And finally, a look at the weather forecast. It will remain relatively cold and partly cloudy tonight, with a chance for rain, especially in the eastern regions. Similar weather conditions continue tomorrow, while winds will be northeasterly to northwesterly moderate, changing to brisk at times. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a recap of our top stories. Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians they alleged carried out knife attacks on Israelis in the occupied West Bank as an 8-week-old wave of violence shows no signs of dying down. The British Prime Minister is set to make the case for war against Daesh terrorists in Syria, which could see airstrikes begin before Christmas. And the Belgian capital extends its top threat alert till tomorrow as security forces continue their search for militants thought to be at large in Brussels. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.